Welcome to the Ball State Master of Urban Regional Planning webinar. We're putting this out for students who are interested in joining our degree program, and we welcome you and ask that if you have any questions, you submit them online so we can answer them during this session. In this session, we're going to talk a little bit about the basics of the program. I'm going to introduce a couple of guests that I have here with me. We're going to talk about graduate assistantships. We're going to talk about studios and immersive classes, which are a unique feature of our program. We're going to talk a little bit about our field trip experiences that we offer to students. And then we're going to end by talking about the admissions process. So, my name is Dr. John H. West. I am an urban planning professor. I have been at Ball State for 4 years. And this year I am the graduate coordinator. So I, along with the chair, review all of the applications and help to make decisions about graduate assistantships and admissions. Before I got to Ball State, I worked as an urban planner, and I got my PhD. When I graduated from my undergraduate program, I had a degree in sociology, which is not urban planning, and this is very typical for the students who apply to our program. Most of our students come from other disciplines. They come from anthropology, they come from history, they come from communication studies, they come from women and gender studies, they come from business. So I graduated with a sociology degree and got involved in nonprofit work. I worked for a nonprofit that helped to start community gardens. And after a little bit of time, I got a bit frustrated with the scope of these projects. The projects were focused on maybe 10 to 15 kids and a community, 2 or 3 community gardens. And so I started to look for ways to engage at a larger scale to deal with more fundamental issues. I thought about applying to law school. I did apply to law school, and during the application process, I discovered the discipline of urban planning. It was in a course catalog for a dual degree program with a law degree. And when I read the course catalog, I said, this is for me. I found a job as an intern in a planning firm, and I worked as a planner at a place called Applied Real Estate Analysis in Chicago, Illinois, for 2 years. And while I was there, I got a master's degree. And by the time I was done with my master's degree, I knew that the questions that I had weren't really answered yet. And so I did my PhD at Columbia University in New York City, and I wrote about administrative practices in the Bloomberg administration. When I finished my degree, I was looking to once again do more applied work. And the urban planning program at Ball State is fantastic for that. As a faculty member at Ball State, I've had the opportunity to work with local city government, to work with local nonprofits, and to engage with the citizens of Muncie. Muncie is a fantastic town for civic engagement. There are lots of opportunities to get involved. Within the first year and a half of me being here, the mayor asked me to help start a new program called a land bank. And for the last 3 years, my research has been focused on how you start a new organization in a place that doesn't have very many resources. And at this point, the land bank is established, and we've hired consultants to come in and help us get our operations running. So a land bank is an entity that helps communities decide what to do with abandoned property. And in the city of Muncie, which is a post-industrial city, which means that it's a city where there was a lot of industry, a lot of car manufacturing and steel wire production actually, most of those industries have left at this point. And there are new industries that are starting to take over. In the process of that transition from industrial to post-industrial, there's a lot of property that's left behind that nobody wants, that nobody needs. And so the land bank is designed to take care of that property. In addition to that, I have worked with students and the Ball State administration to help start a program with a local nonprofit to help renters who are having problems with their landlords, or landlords who are having problems with their tenants. So my experience of coming to Ball State is what as a faculty member, is what I hope students experience as well, which is to say that you come and you have the opportunity to learn a lot of new things, and you also have the opportunity to engage with local communities and do practical and professional work. I've talked about myself a fair amount here, and I'm going to introduce our student guests. So we have Brittany Red. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. So I'm a second-year graduate student in the Urban Regional Planning program. Before I came to Ball State, where should I begin? So I earned my bachelor's degree in international studies with a minor in political science from Butler. And prior to graduating, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I didn't want to just go into a typical 9-to-5. I wanted to do something meaningful, so I decided to enroll in AmeriCorps. So I did a term of service with AmeriCorps Public Allies, where I was placed at Community Development Corporation. And Community Development Corporations, they serve as a resource for communities like John was talking about, communities that have experienced disinvestment, and they strategize on ways to revitalize those communities. So while I was in Public Allies and working for that development corporation, I was really focused on community outreach and serving as a liaison between the Community Development Corporation and the community to make sure that the values and the strategy that the Community Development Corporation was implementing aligned with the needs and the vision of the community. Shortly after my term of service with AmeriCorps Public Allies, I was hired on full-time. So I went from focusing on outreach to implementing plans, community plans. I was kind of a jack of all trades. In that position, I was a community builder, so I still served as a liaison, but then I was also project manager for a waterway revitalization effort. Did a lot of things, and I think my experience at the Community Development Corporation really sparked my interest in urban planning, and it helped me understand how urban planning can be a tool for advocacy and addressing systems. So my personal philosophy of planning is to work alongside neighbors to help them influence the decisions that affect them, instead of not having a voice, and just to help them have more power in their communities. So from there, I decided, to resign from my 9-to-5, pursue grad school, which was kind of scary because I was secure in my position, had that stability. So I enrolled in CAP in Master of Urban and Regional Planning. Like I said, I'm a second year. I'll be graduating this year. I also am pursuing a certificate in social and environmental justice, also in CAP, but in the architecture program. Also, through my time in the MERP, we call it MERP, Master in Urban Regional Planning. During my time at MERP, I'm working on my thesis, which focuses on environmental justice, specifically exposure to hazardous waste in minority and low-income communities, and the connection with housing practices. So.
And we also have Derek Tulowitz.
Tulowitzki, yeah.
Tulowitzki.
Yeah.
He goes by Tulo most of the time.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, keep it simple. Yeah, so my name's Derek Tulowitzki. I am a dual master's student, so I am getting a master's in historic preservation at Ball State as well as a master's of urban and regional planning, MERP. I'm also getting a certificate in social environmental justice as well. And I think that that's part of the strength of this program is we have so many different disciplines within the College of Architecture and Planning. And so if you're interested in the built environment across a lot of different spheres, you're able to pick exactly what type of track you want to go, and you can figure out what exactly it is about that individual thing that you're interested in. So planning's been very good about allowing me to explore preservation as well as planning at the same time. Before coming to graduate school, I got my undergrad also at Ball State, so I've been in Muncie for about a decade now. It'll be a decade in August. My undergrad is in sports history, so perhaps a little bit unique perspective coming to urban planning. But after I graduated in 2013, I worked for 4 years in the public library system. So I was the social media, digital outreach, all things tech person at the library. And during that time, I was able to get involved in museums and libraries as sort of like heritage management type stuff. Actually, one of the weirdest experiences I probably had was I was asked to go to the Library of Congress and teach librarians of Congress how to make GIFs. So that was a really unique experience. And so my background is in understanding that intersection kind of between history and digital and now the built environment. And so basically I decided to leave that past career because like a lot of people, 2016 was kind of a rough year. And so I sort of took like a deep look inward and realized that as far as I was concerned, I really valued the library system. I think that the library system I guess across the world really is a great example of like a common area in a public space. But I technically saw the built environment and cities as, wouldn't it be great if we were able to operate these cities in some type of way that was more like a library rather than more like a space where you had to feel like you had permission. And so I sort of try to take this ethic of openness and being open source along with a lot of interesting perspectives on planning. And so now I'm able to be here, dual master's program. My assistantship, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is in communication studies. And so I'm able to have a lot of different, maybe too many different hands in different pots, I guess. But it's a really unique experience here at Ball State. So you're able to sort of situate the curriculum to what you want to do. And I think that's a really great opportunity.
So just the end of the introduction reminds me of why I really like this job a lot. Brittany and Tulo, I've watched them for the past 2 years, and they really are very interesting, engaged people, and it's very typical of what we see in our program. I want to give you a little bit of information about the basics of the Masters of Urban and Regional Planning. So it's a 2-year program, and one of the things about our program that's unique in the state of Indiana is that we are an accredited urban and regional planning program. And that means that there is a group of professionals who look at our curriculum and look at the classes that we teach and look at the experiences that students have in the program, and they say that this is an accredited program. And that makes it easier for students to get jobs on the other end. It's a quality control check for the faculty and the program, and it's something that we're quite proud of. So the Masters of Urban and Regional Planning at Ball State is the only accredited urban and regional master's program in Indiana. It is a 2-year program, and for the most part, the majority of our students have classes exclusively on Tuesday and Thursday. They are required, you're required to take a total of 48 hours of classes which is approximately 24 classes during your time in the master's program. You will take classes like the Introduction to Urban Planning and more specific classes on, for example, environmental planning, qualitative methods, quantitative methods, classes on ecology, classes on economy. And in addition to that, in addition to the required courses, you're going to have approximately 5 or 6 courses that are electives. And just as Brittany and Derek have done, that gives you the opportunity to either do a double major to get an additional certificate or to just get really into something that you care about. We have students who are interested in urban gardening who take classes in natural resources and environmental management. We have students who are interested in economic development who take classes in the Miller School of Business. And so the program does give you the opportunity to really figure out who you want to be on the other end of it. There's another component of the program that gives you the same kind of opportunity, and that is our capstone research project. So each student, in order to graduate, has to submit either a research project or a creative project or a master's thesis. A creative project is, for example, if a student wants to propose a completely redesigned downtown for a community, that creative work serves as the core of their final project, and they do a little bit of analysis before and after the creative project. A research project is usually a shorter report on some concrete problem that a community or an agency is experiencing. A master's thesis is more akin to an academic writing exercise where you're going to spend a considerable amount of time reviewing other academic literature and producing original research. But in this process, you get to take one class just on how you're going to format your final project. And in that class, we explore the range of possibilities, the range of interests that students might have. And then you actually have class time to write your project. So all of this, the electives and the master's capstone project are really designed to help you identify what kind of planner you want to be. And I would say that typically there are three kinds of roles that our students come out really being expert in, or maybe 4. One is kind of grassroots community work. So working for like a community development corporation, working in collaboration with neighbors and neighborhoods. Another is an expert in planning policy. Those students might go on to work for a housing authority or a state regulatory agency or in a community development office in a city. And then we have students who are particularly interested in design. And those students would work either for a private or a public agency that produces plans, and part of plans is like an illustration of what the neighborhood is going to look like when the plan is done. The final, so if we have the grassroots, the policy-oriented, and the design-oriented, the 4th category would be people who graduate who have an interest in international development. We have a fantastic program here called CAP Asia that's won a variety of Fulbright grants. And about every other year we have a group of maybe 30 students go to Asia and visit between 2 and 5 different countries and get involved in community development and planning projects. So we have the international students, we have the internationally focused students, we have the grassroots students, we have the policy students, and we have the design students. I'm seeing here that we have a question from the audience. How would you describe the profession of planning? This is a great question. I teach a class that is a year long, where we look at all of the different ways that people have described the profession of planning. So what you're going to get here is a very abbreviated version, but planning is about thinking about how to make the future better than the present. Planning, in that sense, it's very general. The discipline of urban planning is particularly focused on the built environment and the process of urbanization, which is to say the ways that cities grow and change. So putting planning and urban together means that you are trying to intervene in the built environment or the process of urbanization in order to make cities, towns, and rural areas better. And this sounds like an idealistic goal, but there are numerous private, public, and nonprofit entities that planners work for that want to achieve these same goals. And our graduates, we have an above 90% placement rate for our graduates in terms of working in the field within 2 years of graduation. So it is another way of that I like to think about it that's a little bit more vague but also a little bit more fun is that planning is practical idealism, which is to say that you are an idealist and you want to see the world become a better place, and yet at the same time it's practical because there are jobs and the salary is significantly above the median salary for all jobs in the United States. So that would be my description of the profession of urban planning. Do you have anything to add, Brittany or Derek?
I think that was a good summary. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think whenever I explain it to people, like my parents, for example, my parents kind of have no idea what I do, which is great sometimes, right? But also, I think of it as sort of that process of trying to make cities better. And I guess it's difficult there because the implication might be that cities are static in some way or already not better than they are. But from my perspective, I really see it as that intervening process to where it's like, I want to be a part of a city's system at some point. Like, I'm just fascinated by how many different aspects of life that mold themselves into a city. And I'm interested in that urbanization, society, and all structures that kind of spawn off of it. It's interesting because you can go in so many different ways, right? Like, you can look at sociology, you can look at preservation, you can end up looking at communication. There's just a lot of different ways you can go about it, and I think that's what attracts me to it also. It's so many different disciplines in a little city.
Okay. I have the same problem when I'm talking to my family about what is this that you're doing. And if I really want to get concrete and not conceptual when I talk to people about planning, I would say step outside and look around. What you see was influenced heavily by an urban planner, whether it's the roads or the buildings or even the air that you breathe, the trees that are around you, how you feel in the space where you are. That's part of urban planning.
These are great descriptions, and the thing to sort of combine with this idea of everything around you is influenced by urban planning and thinking about intervening in cities is that there are specific kinds of technical knowledge that planners rely on to do this work. You're not in the same position as just any old Joe off the street trying to intervene in urban development. You're someone that knows about how economic development works. You're someone who knows how to analyze the market conditions of residential areas, commercial areas, et cetera. You're someone who knows about the environmental impact of different kinds of developments. And you're someone who knows how to facilitate community processes for making decisions. And so in addition to this idealism and this sort of general positioning towards the future and intervening, the urban planning degree gives you skills so that people will listen to and respect what you have to say. All right, so we have another question coming in here. As a new incoming student, what do you wish you'd known ahead of time? And I'm going to defer to the students on this because it's been years for me.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind for me is that you really have to take control of your graduate path. In undergrad, it was you were pretty much guided by the track that was put forth for you.
Right.
You had this checklist of classes that you had to take, and that sort of thing. But at the graduate level, it's completely different. Of course, you do have those required courses and credits that you have to navigate. But when it comes to being a planning professional, there's so many different tracks that you can go, that you can take as a planner, as John mentioned earlier. So I would definitely encourage you to think critically about what really interests you. I think Tulo and I both were very intentional about the electives that we took. We both even went beyond just the required coursework, and I took I'm currently, finishing a certificate, and Tulo a dual degree and a certificate. So I think that's what you should be very deliberate about. So with planning, you can be design focused, policy focused. You can also explore the for-profit side, the non-profit side, the public sector, because those are decisions that you're going to have to make when it's time for you to, find a job.
Yeah, I mean, that for sure. Definitely, sort of make your own path, figure out how you can situate the curriculum to work for you. I think that's the number one answer. So since you already took it, I can't say that. But I think to find something else to say, it's not as scary as it might seem. At least for me, I never thought when I was in high school that I was going to go to college, and then I ended up here. And then after I graduated college, I thought, how'd I do that? That's kind of crazy. And then I never thought I would go to grad school. And then here I am, and I'm 2 months away from being done with grad school. And I'm probably going to look back and be like, how'd I do that? But for me, it was very daunting because I was the first person in my family to ever go to undergrad. And so that was sort of scary, and certainly the first person to ever have a master's degree in my family. But I think that first year for me, I was really scared, thinking, am I doing this correct? Am I putting in enough effort? Some days when you just watch a little bit too much Netflix or whatever one week, and you're like, should there something I should be doing? And then other weeks, you're doing so much work that you feel like maybe you're just doing a bunch of work and not going down the right path. But I think that hindsight 2020, just trusting in faculty and trusting in your peers. I mean, as much as we talk about the different professions that you can go through in planning, everyone in your cohort is also doing that. And so it's I had friends that were there to help me with InDesign or help me with SketchUp when it's I have no design skills. So it was nice to have somebody to lean on in those times. And it's just sort of trust in people around you. It doesn't need to be all on you. Graduate school is as much of a community as it is as the community that you hopefully will go on to serve.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, kind of piggybacking on what you mentioned about the kind of self-doubt. I attended the graduate school orientation, and during the orientation we talked about imposter syndrome and how when you attend graduate school, you have these feelings of self-doubt, and someone is going to discover that you're not as awesome and intelligent as everyone else. But I think it's important to acknowledge that this is something that everyone's experiencing, and it was really helpful for me to go to the graduate orientation. Where we had an honest conversation about that. So when I was tackling different assignments that were completely new to me, I kept that in mind, and like Derek said, I leaned on my classmates who were going through the same thing. If I didn't have that bit of wisdom when I started the program, I think maybe I would have like kind of became even more doubtful, and you know, that sort of thing. So yeah. Don't be discouraged. You're going to experience feelings of self-doubt and all that, and just maybe even being overwhelmed, because there's a lot of new information that you'll be given, just because, I mean, I came from international studies, and even though I had a little bit of experience in community development, the technical part of planning was pretty new to me. So, yeah.
Yeah, you can do it.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Well, I think that there's a nice moment for a bit of a segue here into the aspect of our program that's focused on professional engagement and internships and graduate assistantships, because a lot of students find their passion. They find what they want to do as urban planning students in the program through their graduate assistantship or through the work that they're doing while they're in the program. Again, the master's degree program usually meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and students have 3 days a week to work another job. Oftentimes that is a graduate assistantship. The majority of our students who are in the program get graduate assistantships. Graduate assistantships mean that the university picks up your tuition, and some community partner pays you a salary of at least $7,000 per academic year. So we have students who come in, and they might be in the position that you're in of you know, having a degree in an unrelated field, but then they get an internship working for Indiana Housing and Development Authority, and they learn a little bit about some process going on there, and they become fascinated with it, and that's how they end up directing their graduate studies. I had a student from a few years ago, Beth Neville, who didn't have a planning background, got a GA-ship, and became fascinated with a particular decision-making process in the public agency that she was working for. And there's another question that's come up here that I think, which is what influenced your decision to go into urban planning? And I think for a lot of our students, it is the graduate assistantship program, because it gives you the opportunity to get your hands dirty with some professional work, and it also helps with cost. What about you? What were some of the things, or either one of you, what were some of the things that influenced your decision to choose this urban planning program?
I would definitely say the graduate assistantship was a huge part of my decision. I really appreciated the practical experience that I would gain from a graduate assistantship, not to mention the financial costs that would kind of be mitigated through my graduate assistantship. Yeah, that was a huge part. Cap Asia was a real attraction to me. Because of my international studies background, I could appreciate having a couple of months. How long is this? Like like 3 months?
Yeah,
yeah,
2 or 3 months.
East and Southeast Asia, and working with communities on issues that they're passionate about. So those are really the two things that motivated me to choose the program. And I think that's a really important question, because when you come to that decision on what graduate program you're going to select, there are a variety of factors. For me, cost was a huge factor. I got accepted into other programs, but I didn't want to go into a master's program and leave with a significant amount of debt. So, you know, that's you know, something I don't have to worry about as much in this program.
Right. I think for me, it was, I guess I'm sort of a unique experience because I was already coming here for preservation. And so in part, I chose the urban planning program at Ball State because I was already coming to Ball State. But I think the reason why I chose to get a second degree at all was because a lot of students come to the planning program at Ball State because of our application experience. I think a lot of people, like John said, talked about you get to go out in the community and do a lot of work. But the preservation department does a lot of that as well. And so for me, I actually wanted the urban planning degree to have the theory to supplement some of the preservation work I was doing. And so looking at like planning law, looking at qualitative and quantitative methods, just something to build a more robust theoretical foundation for me to build with my preservation on. And so I think that's the reason why I chose an urban planning program, because it added a year onto my time here at Ball State. So it was a very intentional decision for me to stay another year in my master's program and get a second degree.
These are fantastic answers from your all background. In addition, we have a number of students who come into the program sort of mid-career. So we have a student this semester, Megan, who has been working in a planning agency for a couple of years and came to Ball State to get her master's so that she could learn new skills, and it would help with her professional trajectory going forward. So she goes from being a junior planner to a planner A within her agency, or whatever the title is. And one of the real advantages for returning professionals is that if you can get your employer to sponsor your degree, that can count as a graduate assistantship. And in addition to students who come in with graduate assistantships, our tuition is low compared to other planning schools, and we do offer financial aid, and it's a pretty good deal for students who pay for the program. It's a very good deal. So this is a great moment for another transition here, because we have a question: what sets Ball State apart from other graduate programs in the Midwest? And I have an answer for that. That has to do with the engaged nature of our education. When I say engaged, that I mean that we work with communities, we work with people in delivering our education, and in also oftentimes trying to achieve some sort of concrete goal for a community. So this is our studio and immersive classes experiences at Ball State. So right now we offer studio classes where a group of students, all of our master's students, get together and they, for example, create a master plan for a community in Indiana. What is the city that you all are doing this?
We're working in Montpelier.
So the students are working in the city of Montpelier. They're meeting with the mayor. They're meeting with the city council. They're talking about how to create an appropriate master plan for that community. And this is a really kind of unique aspect of our graduate program, the engaged nature of the work that we do. I'm teaching a master's class right now where we meet in the basement of a church and talk to people about their problems with rental housing. And at the end of that process, we're we are going to create a program that's housed within a nonprofit to give people advice about rental problems. Have you had any particular studio or immersive experiences here that you valued?
So I guess to sort of speak to the interdisciplinariness of the program, my first year here at in graduate school, I worked on a pavilion project. So it was for an urban garden in town, and it was a part of the architecture program, but it was part of my electives. And so I was able to use one of my electives to work in this immersive learning project where we built a pavilion, 2 pavilions actually, for a neighborhood garden at the library that I used to work at. So it was like a very unique experience for me to go back and be like, hey, now that I've left you all and I'm in graduate school, I'm very excited to help build this pavilion here. And so Pam Harwood, an architecture professor, was the professor in charge of that program. And we spent the first half of the semester creating this big master plan with pavilions and how to utilize the garden and a kitchen pavilion so that you can harvest from the garden, take it to the kitchen pavilion, have some community engagement there. We were showing people how to cook, how to use the food, and how to have a nice play space for kids. And so that was like a very unique experience because as a preservationist planner, I'm sort of maybe like a little bit of looking from like a top-down perspective, and when you're like 12 feet up on a ladder screwing in some wood panels, you're kind of terrified. But that really helped me get a different perspective, I think, for what we sort of do, where it's like you make these plans and you figure this out, but you also need to have a certain perspective of what it's like to be the person to implement that. And as a planner, you don't want to put a good plan together, but none of it's able to be implemented. And so that sort of shifted my perspective a little bit.
I guess for me, was it last semester we had participatory action research? And I'm not saying this because John is right here, but one of my good experiences that like allowed me to be immersed in planning was a class called Participatory Action Research. And I was really interested in the philosophy of participatory action because I really believe that when it comes to planning, communities should be involved in it and not just involved in like a superficial way, but be actively engaged. And so in that class, I got to learn more about participatory action and experience firsthand how that occurs as far as like opportunities that it opens up, but then also challenges that could arise when you're being very intentional and about engaging communities. So I really appreciated that real world experience and a philosophy that mattered to me.
Just to like hop in here real quick, for me, because my schedule with classes is a little bit wild, I would say there's so many projects in planning that I've been like, dang, I wish I could have, like that class, I was like, darn it, I wish it fit into my schedule. But I've been able to, currently I serve on 3 nonprofit boards in town. And so the department has been like super productive about that. They've been able to say like, they're all saying, yeah, go for it, like help out as much as you can. And so I think that's even if it might not work with your schedule or you've got something going on, I think the department's really, really good about encouraging you to go explore on your own as well. So it's like if you got something that you really like and there's a nonprofit in town, they're like, yeah, go get involved, go figure out a way to do something for them. Like you're gonna have unique expertise as a graduate student in urban planning that not a lot of people in Muncie in particular have. And so go use that out in the community, go figure out a way to be helpful. And I think that's a really, really great part of the program as well.
Great. And we have a question here, what the typical classroom environment is. I'll give my perspective, which is probably very different from the students, but my perspective is, and one of the thoughts that I have every time that I enter a classroom is, how little can I talk, right? How can I set up the classroom so that students have activities and tasks to complete where they're talking to each other, and even better than that, where they're talking to people who live in the communities that we're thinking about. And so the typical classroom environment for me is one where I pose some general problems, we engage in a project, and the students really do a lot of work independently, checking back in with me when need be. And I'm touching my microphone, I don't know if that sounds terrible or not. All right. So what about for you? What's the typical classroom experience for you all?
I would say very similar to that. I mean, studio is a very different experience than necessarily like more of like a lecture type situation. So I think it kind of depends on which one you want to talk about. Studio is very, hey, can you help me with this? What are you working on? All right, tell me this. Okay, how can we get together? It's a very collaborative environment. And I think that the more lecture style might not necessarily be collaborative, but I wouldn't think that you like, at least I certainly don't interact any less. I think that everybody sort of has an opportunity to get a word in if they have a thought on something. And the faculty is also really good about trying to, if they know that you're interested in something, they'll frame a question or an example to be like, Derek, you know, you're interested in housing, like think about it this way. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. That's great for thinking of me. I appreciate it. It's very nice.
Yeah. Well, I think it varies as far as like the class, but then also the professor. Different professors have different teaching styles. I think, like, let me think. Like for instance, our design and presentation techniques, that was filled with information that was completely new to me. So we went from like, it was such a dynamic course. So we went from being in our studio and like sketching and implementing these different drawing techniques to moving to the computer lab and applying these digital techniques and that sort of thing. So it really depends on the class and, like I said, the professor.
That's great. We have one last question here, but before we get to that, I'm going to say something and then I'm going to repeat it at the end. If you're interested in applying to the Urban Planning Master's Program at Ball State, you can Google Urban Planning at Ball State and click on the admissions tab, and there are detailed instructions there. The admissions process is relatively straightforward. It's important that international students have to submit a TOEFL score if you're from a country where that's required, and you need to get a visa before you come. So the last question that that someone has posed here is, what career options does the MERP degree give me? And I'll start off by saying that we have our recent graduates who are working in a whole variety of different kinds of settings. Some are working for large planning, engineering, architecture, landscape architecture firms in big cities like Chicago and where else? We graduate a lot of students who end up working in Denver at larger firms, and obviously Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. And we have students who are 30 years on in their professional trajectory who are now leaders in those organizations. We had a speaker come today who's the head of a firm that's based in Canada that employs, dozens of people. We have students who graduate and do work in the public sector. So we had a student that graduated and worked for a small town as their only planner for 2 years, and then moved on to a larger city. And I can kind of see where he's going because we have another student who is the head planner of Indianapolis, which is a city of how many thousands of people? Right. Million people?
Almost, a little under 1 million.
A little under 1 million people. So the head planner for the city planning department. And we have students who, and maybe this is a little bit smaller of a cohort, we have students who go into nonprofit work who work on advocacy issues. We have students who work on environmental issues. We have students who work on housing issues and work for community-based nonprofits. So I would say that public, private, and nonprofit paths are sort of the 3 career trajectories for our students. Do you have anything to add to that, or you think that covers it?
No, I mean, I think that was a really good summary. I think kind of along the same lines of what the question is asking as far as like your career options, I think my internship opportunity provided me with important insights as to what options were available to me. So internship is a requirement for the MERP degree, and during my time in my internship, I worked at a private design firm, which it was super insightful because typically you just don't have one particular discipline. And at the firm that I was at, it was majority structural and civil engineers. and a couple landscape architects, and I was the only one with a planning background. So that was really helpful for me to see what my career could look like, as far as the role that planners can play in the built environment. So that was the private aspect. Currently, I have a graduate assistantship in the public sector where I'm working for metropolitan development in the city of Indianapolis, as far as how federal funding is allocated. So those are like completely different experiences. So design side versus financial, like the economic development side. So I think that's a cool thing about planning, is that it's so versatile. You can do so many things with it. And the skills that you acquire in MERP are so valuable in so many different disciplines, whether it's community health, design, well, you name it. It's such a valued skill set, and yeah, a lot of organizations and firms could benefit from those assets.
So I did my internship in San Antonio, which is in Texas, and so I sort of got out of the Midwest, I think, to do it. But part of the reason why I think they were so interested in having me there was because I think the only person who knew how to use GIS in that department, I was in the Office of Historic Preservation, was my boss. And so they were like, oh, you know how to use GIS, that's really great. So I think that even like taking it outside of urban planning a little bit, you get these skills that give you that a little nudge above maybe somebody who just has a preservation degree or just has a public policy degree, or even like, depending on what you're doing, just has a law degree. You can say, I have this ability to do this, which is just like a little bit notch above. And so, because I'm very interested in preservation, currently I'm applying for a lot of preservation jobs, but I'm also applying for community organizing jobs. And so I think that that's what's been really nice about urban planning, is it's given me this perspective to like understand law and understand how to interact with community members and how to get them to participate in their own planning process. And I think that being able to take those sort of skills and say, okay, everybody else around me is going this way. What if I got my own little path over here to the corner and just sidestep that a little bit, because that seems like, you know, all my friends are doing this. And so that's what I've been able to do with it. And it's been, I would say, very successful so far.
Yeah. Well, you know, I just want to thank Derek and Brittany so much for coming and talking about their experience in the program. It is very rewarding as a faculty member to see the careers and the educational trajectories of our students. I think that we're going to wrap up our discussion here. Thank you for listening to us talk. If you have any questions, you can always email me. My email address is jhwest@bsu.edu. You can give me a call. My phone number is 765-285-1918. And if you're interested in just going ahead and applying, just Google Ball State Urban Planning and look for the admissions tab. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day.